Good morning, everyone. This is Ben Weisner, your host and presenter for this morning's presentation. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Read Naturally Live Basics. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. I've been with Read Naturally for over 14 years now. I am the individual that works with many of our schools, districts, teachers, and administrators to assist them in understanding best practices and the use of Read Naturally Live in their classrooms. After our presentation today, if you'd like to reach me, you can email me at ben@readnaturally.com. You can also call me at my desk number, 651-286-8722. Today's presentation will include time for questions and answers, so please ask me your questions using the questions tool in your meeting panel on the right side of your screen. Given our time constraints today, I will not be able to respond to all of your questions, but I will make an effort to get back to as many of you as possible in the coming days with email responses to those I was not able to address today. You should have all received the link to the handouts for today's meeting. The handouts are also available from the meeting panel if you'd like to download and print them out now. Many of you have also asked about a recording of this webinar. We will be recording the presentation and sending out follow-up emails with links to the recording in about 24 hours. So look for that in your inbox. Feel free to share the recording with anyone at your school or district who you think would benefit from this very valuable information. Also, at the end of our session, you'll be asked to provide us with feedback about today's webinar via a very short survey. If you could, please respond to the survey so we can continue to improve the webinar experience for all of you in the future. And finally, if you are having technical difficulties, please contact GoToWebinar support. Their phone number is listed at the bottom of the meeting panel. And now, without further delay, let's get started with today's Read Naturally webinar. So this morning, what I'd like to do is give you an overview of Read Live, what Read Live is and what it consists of. Then we'll talk about how to plan to deliver the Read Naturally Live strategy in your classroom and the resources that you'll need. I'll show you how you can help students get started in the program and the teacher module. And then I'll show you how students use the program in the student module. We'll return to the teacher module to see how teachers monitor progress using the reports. And then we'll talk about Read Naturally online resources that you can find on our website. And then at the end of our session, I will get into the Q&A portion of our program. And as I mentioned earlier, if I don't get to your questions, I'll try to respond to those in the coming week via email. So Read Live is a reading assessment and intervention program. It's actually two programs in one. There's the Benchmark Assessor Live piece and the Read Naturally Live piece. I'll be focusing primarily on the intervention, the Read Naturally Live portion of Read Live. But let me just give you a high-level overview of both of those components. So Read Live is a comprehensive research-based reading intervention and assessment program that was developed by Read Naturally. Read Naturally programs have a track record of more than 20 years in thousands of schools across the country and also in countries outside of the United States as well. Read Live provides options for differentiated instruction for an RTI program, particularly useful for tiers 2 and 3. And Read Live is delivered via the internet, so you can use it anywhere that you have an appropriate device and an internet connection. So you can use various components on either regular computers and laptops, Chromebooks, or iPads. The iPad supports the student module and Read Naturally Live. You will need a separate but free iPad app to use the program on those devices. I'll talk more about the different ways that the program is delivered on your device as we go through the presentation. So earlier this month, we released the latest version of Read Live 2.0. We made significant enhancements to the student module. Primarily, we have removed the requirement for Flash to provide better security, to ensure that the program continues to work appropriately and well within the new browser requirements that we're seeing being developed by Google Chrome and Apple Safari and Internet Explorer, etc. So Flash is not required for the student module, but it still will be required for the time being in the teacher module. We also have a new login process, and I'll demonstrate that for you when I get into the demonstration. There are separate login pages for teacher and student, and there's a new landing page. The login now requires you to have your account ID, and again, I'll talk more about that when we get into the demo. The student module is responsive to changes in screen resolution. So in other words, as the screen resolution changes or as you change the size of your browser window, the screen design or the screen layout will change, and I will demonstrate that for you. We've also fixed a number of bugs. We have a fresh new look for the student user interface. Teachers can now place students in the iPad app. If students have not been placed yet and students go to log in, you will have an option to place them at that point. And we now have available the Retail and Phonics wordless graphs in the iPad app. So we've made some significant changes in Read Live 2.0. So I mentioned that Read Live has two components. There's the assessment component, the assessment program, Benchmark Assessor Live. Benchmark assessment is available for grades 1 through 8 with grade level passages. There are 3 passages for 3 different benchmark periods in the program. The passages are field tested. We use the results of the different assessments in the 3 different benchmark periods. We average the students' words correct per minute scores, and we compare those scores to national norms. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're using for the national norms in Benchmark Assessor Live. The reports that we generate are suitable for teachers to come up with instructional decisions, to monitor and document progress of students, and to predict performance on standardized state tests. Now, you don't need Benchmark Assessor Live to use the Read Naturally Live piece, but if you don't have a screening and assessment tool for fluency, this is a wonderful option. The other component, the other program in Read Live is Read Naturally Live. That's where we'll be spending the bulk of our time this morning. And as I mentioned earlier, Read Naturally strategy programs have been used successfully in schools for more than 20 years. Throughout that time period, we have made ongoing enhancements to content and functionality. The Read Naturally strategy was first delivered with paper and audio cassette tapes and has evolved. And Read Naturally Live has also evolved in the years that it's been available. And as I said, we just released the latest version, Read Live 2.0, earlier this month. With Read Naturally Live, the curriculum that's available to you is organized and delivered in short, high-interest nonfiction passages. There are 24 passages in each reading level in our sequenced and phonics series, and there are 12 passages in each of the idiom series levels. I'll show you shortly how our levels and series are organized. Our reading levels are appropriate for use by students from first grade through high school and beyond. So students that are developing readers or students that are needing a reading intervention are primary targets for our program. So the Read Naturally strategy is delivered with 3 research-proven components. The first that I'll talk about is teacher modeling, where students will model reading from a fluent reader. In the case of Read Naturally, that is a narrator that is reading the high-interest nonfiction passages to the student, and the student is reading aloud, quietly modeling that narrator's rate, accuracy, and expression. The repeated reading research-based component involves students reading the passage multiple times until they have mastered it, until they're reading at a particular rate that the teachers assign to them, and reading with accuracy and expression. And then there's a progress monitoring component built into the program. So students see their own progress over time. They're able to track that with charts and graphs and other cues built into the program, visual and audio cues built into the program. And the teachers also are able to track progress with data capture and reports. We combine those 3 components into the powerful Read Naturally strategy that I'll be demonstrating for you. So as I mentioned to you, the Read Naturally curriculum is organized into nonfiction passages, and the passages are then organized further into levels. And the levels are organized into series. So in our sequence series, we have 13 different levels, beginning with level 1.0, moving up in half grade or half reading level increments up until level 8.0. You can see that when we get into 6, 7, and 8, they go up in full levels, full reading levels. But 1.0 through 5.6 move up in half grade or half reading levels, half grade reading levels. In our sequence series, we also provide an option for Spanish translation read-along. So in other words, if your students are native Spanish speakers and you want to turn on a Spanish translated read-along step where students can read the story in Spanish with a Spanish-speaking narrator reading the story aloud to them, that is an option for you in levels 1.0 through 4.5 in our sequence series. Our phonics series is appropriate for students reading approximately 3rd grade reading level or below, and who also need phonics support in the key areas that you see here listed. So again, for example, level 1.3 is going to be at roughly somewhere between a 1st and a 2nd grade reading level, and is appropriate for students who need support with long vowel sounds. And I'll talk a little bit more about how the phonics series differs from the sequence series a little bit later on. And then we also have an idioms series for levels 3.0 to 4.5. Each of these levels has 12 stories compared to the 24 stories in sequence and phonics. Each of the idioms series levels has stories that contain approximately three American language idioms, and is appropriate for students who need additional practice at those levels, levels 3.0 to 4.5, or who would benefit from exposure to American language idioms, so for example, English language learners. So you have access to all 23 of these reading levels when you assign a student a license. They can access any of those levels. So the first thing you're going to do when you first start using Read Live is to determine who needs a reading intervention. So we typically recommend students that are reading 10 words or more below the 50th percentile in our Hasbro continual table with national fluency norms are students that are going to be the prime candidates for Read Naturally Live. Students above the 50th percentile are low risk and do not need to spend time in Read Naturally. Students that are reading at that 50th percentile and not more than 10 words below can be monitored to determine if they move up or down from that. Our Benchmark Assessor Live program, as I mentioned earlier, is a good way to do your screenings, and you can run reports that will identify those students that are falling into that below that 50th percentile category. But if you want to, you can just use standard grade level passages on your own to identify those students at risk. So here's the Hasbro continual table that I mentioned earlier. You can find this available on our website. Just search Hasbro Tyndall table, and you'll find it in our list of resources. So again, you can have students read grade level passages, three passages in the fall, the winter, and the spring benchmark period, average their scores, and then compare their scores to these norms that you see here. Once you've determined which students would benefit from the reading intervention, you can start setting up your workspace and your schedule. So here are some guidelines for you. As I mentioned, all you really need to use Read Naturally Live is an appropriate device and an internet connection. Any of the workspaces that you see here would work for you. So you can use it in an individual classroom station for one-to-one work with students, or you can use it with groups in reading labs or computer labs. We typically recommend a teacher-to-student ratio of about 1 teacher, 1 adult to 8 students. If you want to have larger groups, you'll need to have additional adults to assist you in managing those groups, those larger groups. We recommend 30 minutes per session, 3 to 5 days per week. If you can do it up to 5 days a week, that would be preferred. You'll be able to see faster gains with more exposure for students to the Read Naturally Live program. Students, by the way, if you allow them to, can continue working on their own at home once they've left the classroom, as long as you provide them or allow them to use the program with the credentials that they have used in the classroom. Because it's web-based, they can stop using it in the classroom and continue where they left off in another setting the next time they log back in again. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to demonstrate for you the 4 key steps to getting students started in the program. We're going to add students, we're going to license students, we're going to place students, and then you're going to teach students how to use Read Naturally Live, and you can kind of follow along with me, or I'll demonstrate for you how to do that as I show you how to do it. So what I'm going to do now is step out of my PowerPoint slideshow, and we're going to get into our live demo. So bear with me here for a moment. Okay, so what we're looking at right now is the new landing page for Read Live 2.0. If you've used Read Live in the previous years, you would have come to a different page when you entered in your specific web address. So last school year, you would have had to have entered a URL that typically ended with an 8-digit number. That would have been your account ID, typically 000 and then a set of additional digits. But now you come to a landing page. So even if you type in your old URL or web address, you'll come to this page. So if you are a staff member, which I presume everyone on this webcast is, you'll click on the staff member button, and that will take you to your login, staff member login. And as you can see, I pre-populated my account ID. You will need that number. Once you enter it for the first time, you won't have to enter it each time you go to log in. So that account ID number will persist. We continue to send emails to you with your account ID. If you still don't know it, the next step might be to contact your account administrator. And if you still don't have it at that point, feel free to give us a call and we can help you find your account ID. So in addition to that, you'll need to have your user ID and password. So your account administrator would have set you up in the program with a unique user ID and your password, and you'll use that to log in initially. So I'm going to do that right now. And that will bring me to my teacher module. This is where I do my record keeping, where I place students, where I run reports, etc. Let's go over this high level. So there are 5 different tabs. If you're a teacher, the first tab is orientation. This is a very, very useful, again, a landing page for information about how to use the program. So clicking on the links on the left side of the screen will bring you to additional information on the right side here. And then you can click further to get additional information about these specific tasks. So I mentioned we're going to be covering adding students, licensing students, and placing students. And you can find all of that information here. So even if you've forgotten everything that I've talked about here today, you can just go to the orientation tab and that will help you with a lot of these tasks that we're talking about. The Students tab is where you'll do much of your record keeping and management of student information. Notice that Students has additional links underneath it. So the summary view is what we'll be looking at first to add a student, but then to place students, you'll go to the Read Naturally Live view. And if you have Benchmark Assessor Live, you'll click that to access Benchmark Assessor Live's functionality from there. My Groups is where you can create groups of students for additional refinement in record keeping or reporting. Licensing is where you manage your licenses, where you license students or remove licenses from students. And then Reports is where you generate reports, and I'll come back to this tab a little bit later in our presentation. So to add a student, you'll be in the summary view. You'll click on Add Student and then just complete this information. It's fairly straightforward. Any fields that have an asterisk will require information, will require data. I've pre-populated a student record here. And you can see user IDs must be unique for students. Passwords do not need to be unique. If you have a parent or guardian email address, please enter that here. That will allow you to email progress reports and letters home to parents. Once you've added a student, and by the way, your account administrator can also import groups of students. They have additional functionality and additional setup tab where they can import a list of students via a comma delimited file like an Excel spreadsheet file. Once a student has been added, the next thing you're going to do is license the student. You go to the Licensing tab and then just click on the little checkbox next to the student's name, click Save, and then you add that student to your list of students in that manner. If for whatever reason at some point in the future your student no longer needs to use Read Naturally Live, you can simply uncheck that box, save it again, and then that removes the license so that you can use it with a different student in the future, or so that you can transfer that license to another teacher who may need it as well. So once you've licensed your student, the next thing you're going to do is place your student, and you'll go back to the Students tab, click on Read Naturally Live, and notice that now Brienne is now in my list of students, but she does not yet have a series, level, or goal assigned to her. So the next thing we're going to do is click on the Place link under the Action column, You should have some basic knowledge about Brianne's reading capabilities to begin doing the placement test, but you can just make a guesstimate. So in our example, Brianne is in 4th grade. I believe that she's reading slightly below grade level, so I'm going to begin our placement test by clicking on 3.5. I'll click Next. And that will bring up a sample passage from, let me increase my audio here. That will bring up a sample passage from level 3.5. And Brianne and I will be sitting in front of the computer screen, and I'll have her read from this passage for 1 minute to get a score of words correct per minute, and that'll help us determine what the appropriate level and goal is for her. So I'll click on the Start Timing button. That begins our 1 minute timing. There's a reading guide that you can turn on or off. That's this yellow bar that follows my cursor. You can either move that with the mouse or with the arrow keys. As Brianne is reading, I'm counting the number of words that she mispronounced or skipped or stopped on for more than a few seconds. We have a rubric, an outline of what words to count or not count when you are calculating difficult or missed words out on our website. I'll show you that when we get into our resources. But another way to do counting of missed or difficult words is to remember the mnemonic stop, stumble, skip. Stop for more than a few seconds, stumble over a word, or skip the word. A bell will ring after 1 minute. I'll click on the last word read correctly and then type in the number of words that the student missed.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
And that will calculate our score. So I click the word microscope. That's 79 words read. But let's say Brianne missed 5 words. So our score is 74. I'll click Next. On the left side, we'll see our assessment results. So her score falls directly within our placement range, which means this is a good level for her. On the right side, the recommendation is to keep her in level 3.5. The goal will be 105. So the program added 30 words to her score. If she had been in 5th grade or higher, it would have added 40 words to her score and rounded to the nearest 5. And because level 3.5 is available in both our idioms and sequence series, the teacher decides which series to work in initially. So I'm going to select sequence 3.5 and then click Next. The program might also have recommended to continue testing, or you can always manually set series level and goal to override the program's initial recommendations. By the way, you can also print out the results. You'll need to do that before you move forward, but this does allow you to keep a written record of the placement test. Notice that Brianne's series level and goal has been automatically entered into her record. As she moves through the program, you can always click on Edit to change the series level and goal as her progress improves. Or if you feel like you made, there was some issue when you first placed her and you needed to make a correction, you can do that here. Okay, so we've gone through 3 key steps to get students started. We've added a student, we've licensed the student, and then we've placed the student. And as I mentioned earlier, you can always return to the Orientation tab to review those tasks. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how students work in the program. I have some resources to share with you a little bit later, but you can start here. If you want to learn about that process, you can find that in the Orientation tab as well. I'm going to log out, and now we're back to our staff member login page. Remember, this is a little bit different if you've used this program last year. And now we'll have to go back to our landing page. I'll click on this home page button in the upper left. And now we're going to run through a scenario of a student using the program. So I'll click on Student. Again, the account ID is required the first time that the student logs in to the program. The student will need to have their user ID and password.
Please select a story.
And when they log in, they'll come to the story selection screen. Notice that some of these stories are listed as passed. I cannot click on them to do them again once they've been passed. I have to select a new story in my list. So you notice that there are 12 stories in this set. I mentioned there are 24 stories in a level, but they see only 12 stories at a time. I also mentioned earlier the responsive screen. So this is what I mean by a responsive screen. When I resize the screen changes to adapt to the screen resolution, or if my resolution changes, it will adapt. So that's one example of how that works. In the student selection screen, level and goal is visible by clicking on the level goal area up at the top. There's a teacher menu, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And there's always audio instructions available by clicking on the icon in the lower left. I'll start by clicking on the Zebras button. Please note that the stories are not organized in any particular way. In other words, they don't go from easier to harder as we move from left to right. Students simply select the stories that they are interested in and allow them to explore the stories as they wish.
Zebras.
Are you ready to start this story? Click each key word to learn the word and what it means.
So the first step in our sequenced levels is the keyword step, where students are introduced to key vocabulary, terms, and their definitions. They'll have to click on each one of these words before the next button in the lower right corner is enabled.
Pattern. A pattern is a set of things, like colors, shapes, lines, or sounds, that is repeated. Recognize. Recognize means to know what something is after seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, or tasting it. Alex knows Mom is baking cookies because he can recognize the smell coming from the kitchen.
So all of these words are going to appear in our story. They'll also be available to click on again in upcoming steps like the read-along and the quiz step.
Species. Species are groups of plants or animals that are alike in certain ways. Mammals include many species, such as lions, giraffes, and humans.
Introducing the students to these key vocabulary words and their definitions primes them for the comprehension piece that we focus on in Read Naturally Live. We're also going to ask the students in the next step, the prediction step, to use at least one of these keywords when writing their predictions.
Zoologists. Zoologists are people who study animals.
Click a word again, or click Next to continue.
So after I've clicked zoologist, the next button displays. I'll click next to move forward to prediction.
Look at the story title, keywords, and picture. Write a prediction about the story. Then, click Next to continue.
So the prediction asks the student to write what they think they know about this particular subject via prior knowledge or using the title, the picture, and one or more of the keywords and their definitions. Student can always click back to return to the keyword step. They have 2 minutes to complete the step. The timing of those 2 minutes begins as soon as the student begins typing into this box. Teachers do have the option to change the amount of time that students have to complete the step, or you also have the option to turn the step off entirely. The teacher menu in the upper right-hand corner allows teacher access to functionality that is also available in the teacher module. So for example, you can change story options, you can change series level and goal, you can print out awards or stories from this teacher screen. I'd like to take a look at change story options. This is where you adjust the amount of time students have for the prediction and the retell. So if students need more time, you can simply select that from this drop-down. Or if you want to turn this step off entirely, you can just do that here. This is also where I mentioned earlier you can turn on the Spanish read-along to allow students in sequence levels 1.0 through 4.5 to read the story in Spanish first. And other options are available to you as well. You can find more information about the story options screen and what you can do with it in our user guide available on our website.
Look at the story title, keywords, and picture. Write a prediction about the story.
So I'll just type
Then,
something into this
click
box
Next to continue.
to move us forward. So once a student has typed their prediction, they'll click Next, keeping in mind that up to this point they've been working independently.
Play Wordtastic while you wait for your teacher. Click the best answer to score points. Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you.
So the next step, if we look at the progress bar up at the top, is cold timing. In this scenario, teacher is required for cold timing and for past timing. You can adjust whether teacher is required in that story option screen that I demonstrated for you earlier. Because teacher is required and we want students to remain engaged with the program, we provide you with this waiting time activity called Wordtastic. Wordtastic is a synonym and antonym word matching game. Students match by clicking on the word that they think fits most appropriate for the synonym or the antonym. If they miss an answer, the answer is provided for them. They can also click on words.
Disturbing. Careless.
To hear them spoken aloud. They should really only be on in this activity until you are available to come and listen to them read for the cold timing step. When you're available, you'll click on the Conduct Cold Timing button up at the top center of the screen.
Click Start Timing and begin reading. Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you. Click Finished if you finish reading before the bell sounds.
So now we're assuming that teacher and student are sitting together. I do want to demonstrate very quickly again that responsive screen that I mentioned earlier. So by changing the screen size or the resolution, you change the appearance, and notice how the page buttons, forward and backward buttons, appear as I adjust the size or the resolution of my screen. So again, cold timing, teacher and student sit together for a 1-minute timed reading of the passage for the first time. Reading guide can be turned on or off. That's that yellow bar that we see. So student begins reading. We'll click on the Start Timing button. Unlike with our placement demonstration that I showed you earlier, instead of counting difficult words, here difficult words are identified with a mouse click.
Stripes. Pattern. Recognize.
And as you can see, when I click on a word, that word is highlighted, that word is underlined. It's spoken aloud. The word is also subtracted from our score of words read to give us a words correct per minute score. And then the program also keeps track of the number of difficult words and also which difficult words were clicked on in the report so that you can review and discuss the kinds of words that students are having difficulty with. We ultimately strive to allow students to click on their own words.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
We do encourage students to take ownership over their own success. If you feel like you need to do the clicking initially to model and coach the student to do that, that's entirely appropriate. But what we're striving for is student independence when identifying difficult words. So after the 1-minute timing is over, we'll click on the last word the student read.
Click Next to continue.
That gives us our score. And then clicking Next will show us the score in
Look
graph
at how many
format.
words you read correctly per minute. Click Next to continue.
You can see the goal and the cold timing score listed up here. And then during the hot timing, we'll see an addition to this graph with a red stacking bar on top of the blue bar to identify the hot timing. I'll click Next to move forward to the read-along step.
Click Start Read Along to read along, or click Next to continue.
So the read-along is where students read the passage multiple times with the support of the narrator. They're reading along quietly with their lips moving and their vocal cords vibrating. They're wearing headphones. They're doing this independently. They don't need a microphone. There's no recording aspect of the program. They're just reading quietly to themselves. Typically, there would be 3 read-alongs that a student would have to perform before the next button would be available. They would see 3 stars underneath the picture to identify whether they've completed a read-along or not. But I've changed our settings so that we don't have to sit through an entire 3 read-alongs. I just want to demonstrate what is happening on the screen and what the narrator sounds like. So I'll click Start Read-Along.
Most people know that zebras are wild horses with stripes and that they live in Africa. But did you know that of all the zebras in the world, no 2 look exactly alike?
Click Start Read Along to read along again.
So as you can see, the sentences are highlighted as they are being read aloud. Another thing I want to point out to you is that during the 3 read-alongs, the default 3 read-alongs, the narrator's rate is lower than at the beginning than it is in the second and the third read-along. So in other words, the narrator's rate and even the narrator's expressiveness increases after each of the 3 read-alongs. In between each of the read-alongs, students have the ability to click on vocabulary words. Some of these we saw earlier, like pattern and species, and some of these are new, like camouflage.
Camouflage. Camouflage is a way of hiding something by making it look like the things around it.
So as you can see, there's a considerable number of vocabulary words in addition to the ones, in addition to the 4 we saw earlier. So once the student has completed all 3 read-alongs, they'll move forward to practice.
Click Start Timing and begin reading. Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you. Click Finished if you finish reading before the bell sounds.
So during the practice step, students continue reading the story without the support of the narrator. And again, from the Read Naturally strategy components that I mentioned earlier, this would be the repeated or an aspect of the repeated reading piece. Students are continuing to practice independently. We have a default setting that requires them to complete 3 practices at a minimum. Even if they've met their goal, they have to continue practicing until they've done all 3 practice reads. If they are reading too swiftly, so in other words, if they are reading much faster than they reasonably could be based on their goal setting, they'll see a message as follows.
Your score is much higher than your goal. Please read the story again.
So they may see this if they are not following instructions, or they may also see this if their goal is set extremely low or too low for them. If you start seeing practice not scored in the scores box, you're seeing that happening repeatedly, that would be an indicator to you that the student needs a little bit more oversight from you. So you might want to just come over and take a look and see what's happening with them. Otherwise, again, students are doing this independently, and they should be practicing multiple times. We would expect them to practice between 3 to 10 times. 3 to 10 times. That's our expectation during the practice step. You'll be able to track that in the reports. So if students are continually practicing fewer than 3 times and reaching their goal right away, or conversely, practicing more than 10 times and are unable to meet their goal, those would be indicators that a student, other aspects of the student's progress need to be reviewed in the reports to determine whether a setting needs to be changed, most likely their goal. Here too, students can and should click on difficult words.
Recognize.
To practice them
Scientist.
in preparation for passing the story. So once they reach their goal,
click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
Once they reach their goal, they'll be able to move forward.
You've reached your goal. You've finished all your practices. Click Start Timing to practice again, or click Next to continue. Click the best answer, and then click Next.
After practice, we're going to measure students' comprehension with the quiz and the retell steps. In the quiz, we have a combination of multiple choice and short answer questions, anywhere between 5 to 9 questions depending on the level. Students do receive audio feedback when answering the multiple choice questions. So that casino sound means the student answered the question correctly, and that boop boop sound means they've answered the question incorrectly. They do have access to the story text and the vocabulary as they're answering the questions. And each of the quiz questions will focus on a different comprehension skill, allowing you to evaluate student progress in key comprehension areas. So the reports will show you where they are answering questions correctly most frequently, and which skills they need some additional support in. In addition to multiple choice and short answer, we have other types of questions like sorting and matching, and fill in the blank, etc.
Retell or summarize the story in your own words. Click Review Story if you want to read the story again.
So the retell is another way that we measure comprehension. Students type a summary of the story in their own words. They have 5 minutes to complete this step. They can review the story by clicking on the Review Story button, but as you can see, they can't type while this story text is visible. They'll have to click on Back. This is another one of those steps where you can change the amount of time that the student has to complete it, or you can turn it off entirely. Retell is subjective. It's up to the teacher to evaluate the retell text during the final pass step.
Now you're ready to pass. Read the story and play Wordtastic until your teacher comes to pass you on this story.
So just as we saw during the cold timing step, where the bar at the top and the bottom of the screen turns red, indicating that the student is waiting for the teacher, the student can continue practicing on the screen, and after a practice read, some Wordtastic questions will appear again and alternate between those two waiting time activities. When you are available, you'll click on the Conduct Past Activities link, type in your credentials, and then for the final timing, you'll sit with the students and evaluate them on the 3 primary components of fluency, and those are rate, accuracy, and expression. And unlike in the cold timing and the practice steps, we do not click on missed or difficult words here. We're simply counting the words as we did in the placement step. So we'll count difficult words. After 1 minute is up, we will click on the last word read correctly, enter in the number of missed words here, and then for the first time, we haven't done this previously, we'll provide the student with an expression score. We have a scale, a subjective scale of 1 to 4, and the little information icon that you see here will provide you with information about what we're looking for expression. In addition to rate, accuracy, and expression, we're going to expect the student to comprehend what they've read, so they'll have to have answered
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
They'll have to have answered all of the quiz questions correctly on their first attempt and responded to the retell appropriately in order to pass. So I'll click on the last word read correctly. So that's 125 words. Let's say the student missed 3 words. So 3 or fewer words are required to pass. Here's my expression scale. 2 or higher on the scale is a passing score. So I'll give the student a 2. They've met all 3 of my fluency criteria. And here's my cold and hot timing graph, which you can review and print in other portions of our program in our review work screen that we'll see in a moment, and also in the teacher module. So you'll have to evaluate the open-ended questions here. The answer key is built into the screen. You'll also evaluate the retell response. And this is the story details screen where you can review the student's work. This is principal. You can see here that out of our 5 criteria, the student missed 1, so they don't pass right away. You can review any of the missed quiz questions, and as you can see, all of the steps are presented here so you can see how they performed. You can review students' progress over time in fluency, in comprehension, and in number of words used in retell. And again, all of these are printable from here. Because this student did not meet all 5 criteria, you can provide them with some remedial action at this point. So in this case, I'm going to have the student go back and redo the missed quiz questions. Click Next.
Click the best answer, and then click Next. Congratulations! You passed this story. Click Done to finish.
Now that I've met all of my key criteria, I see my certificate, which is printable or emailable home to the parent.
Please select a story.
And my zebra's icon is now labeled as passed. So the next time I log in, or if I still have time during my current reading session, I would choose another story and begin that process over again. The phonics stories, the phonics levels are a little different than the sequence series and the idiom series in that instead of a key vocabulary set of words and definitions, under the keyword step, we have a list of words that we present in a short phonics lesson for the student to review before they begin the story. And another key difference is that instead of a retell step, there's a list of words, a word list, that's displayed in a grid, and students have to read those words down and across within a minute as a requirement for passing, and all the words reinforce or support the phonics element of that story. So I'm going to log out. I'm going to log back in as a teacher, so I'm going to go back to my landing page, click Staff Member. And when I want to start working or start looking at the student data, I'll go back to the Reports tab. There's a couple of different kinds of reports: student level reports, students at a glance. There are logistical reports like the roster and the password step. So you'll determine which ones are most suitable for you. We believe student level reports and students at a glance are the most useful. Students at a glance is particularly useful for instructional decision making. Student level reports I'm going to show you just because it's a little bit easier to demonstrate for the purposes of our demo. So I'm going to select Melissa Powell, and let's see what her level summary looks like. I just select her name and click Generate Report. That will display the report in a separate tab with all of the key data points that we're tracking in these columns, and then a reports descriptor in the final page. You can also see progress in graphical displays for fluency, comprehension, and retell, or word lists if they've been working in phonics. So here's a comprehension graph. Because these are PDF files, you can save them and email them later to parents or other teachers, or you can print them out. So I'm going to stop here. We're getting close to our time limit, so I want to make sure that we have some time for Q&A. So bear with me here for a moment. Oh, and actually I do want to show you one more thing before I get to the Q&A. When you are logged in as a teacher, there is a help link in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Clicking Help will get you to our Read Live Help resources page. And this resources page contains a number of very valuable tools for you. There are a number of videos that you can view at your discretion, over an hour's worth of video clips that go through placement, setting up students, how to import student data, setting up your account, how students use the program, etc. So I do recommend that you go and watch any of these videos to review what we've talked about today. There are also more in-depth information in the form of Read Live User Guide and Smart Start Guide. There are links to our knowledge-based topics, recorded webinars. This webinar will be placed up here as an update to our older recording of Read Naturally Live Basics. But there's also some recordings for checking initial placement, more in-depth about progress monitoring, etc. There's also a very, very useful 3-hour online course that I recommend everybody work through at the beginning of the year or as you start using the program. It's completely free. You just click on this link, sign up, and begin working. Lesson plans that you can download to help you introduce the program to your students, our fidelity checklist, welcome letters to parents in English and Spanish, a little steps poster that you can download, print out, and laminate for your students to learn how to use the program. We also have an additional set of waiting time activities in the form of crossword puzzles that correspond to the stories in the levels. So you can use those to supplement the wordtastic activity if you wish. So again, the way I got here is by clicking on the help link in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, I'm going to stop here and take a few questions. I know I'm going to go over my time limit, so if you feel like you need to leave, feel free to do so, but I'm going to answer some questions and we'll have that in the recording for you tomorrow. So let me log out first and let's take a look at what we have here. So I have a question here about changing read-along speed, resetting stories. So let's take a look at some of those options. So I'm going to log back in again into the teacher module. I showed you earlier how to access story options from the student screen, but you can also access them from the teacher module. So just click on Read Naturally Live, select the student's name by clicking on the checkbox next to their name, and click Story Options. That gets you to this screen. Now the default number of read-alongs is set to 3. And as you can see, we cannot change or adjust the speed of the read-along. As I said earlier, the speed is automatically set and it will gradually increase in rate and expressiveness. But if you set it to 1 read-along, that unlocks the speed setting and you can make your changes here. As far as resetting stories, that's an important thing to know about for a couple of reasons. So the reset link is right here next to the student's name. I'm in the Students tab, Read Naturally Live view. Clicking on Reset allows me to essentially remove the data for a story. So it says here that all these stories have been completed, but let's say a student is in the middle of a story. They might be stuck on practice. They may have practiced 14, 15 times. They just can't get through the story, but they can't move to a different story unless you reset it. So you would come to that reset screen here, click on this little checkbox, click reset, and that removes the data and basically gets the student back to square one with that particular story. Another good practice at the beginning of a school year would be to reset any story that a student has started in the previous school year and maybe inadvertently did not complete it, but now they're coming back to using Read Naturally Live again. We do recommend that any in-progress stories from previous school year should be reset. That just kind of helps with making sure that your data is cleaned up appropriately and students are starting fresh for the school year. Okay, questions about account numbers. Again, I'll go back to my previous screen. When you come to the landing page for the first time and you select staff member or student, you will, for the first time, if you're new to Read Naturally Live 2.0, you will have to enter in your account ID. It's an 8-digit account number. If you've used Read Naturally Live in previous years, it would have been that 8-digit number that was appended at the end of your web address. Or again, if you don't have that, just contact your account administrator, take a look at recent emails that we've sent out, or just give us a call, and we'll help you with that. But you will need that both as a staff member for the staff member login and for the student login, but know that once you've entered that for the first time, you won't have to do it again. Okay, a question about home use. So students can use the program at home if they wish, as long as they have their web address. And at this point, it's just readlive.readnaturally.com, their account ID, their user ID, and their password. So that's not really, technically that's not an issue. They can use the program in the classroom on a computer or Chromebook, and then if they have an iPad at home, as long as they have the iPad, they can log in from there and just pick up where they left off. If you are an account administrator, I'm going to log in as an account administrator here and show you one thing. Or if you're a teacher and you want to talk to your account administrator, you can also allow parents to work with their child at home by adding them as a program helper. So you can add a parent as a program helper, which allows the parent to have a password to listen to the student read in the cold timing and past timings, but does not allow the parents to get into the teacher module to look at reports, manipulate data, look at other student records, etc. So it's a very limited capability if you want to allow parents to work with their child at home, or if you have maybe in classroom volunteers, again, who would have limited roles in working with students in the classroom, but would not need to get into the teacher module. And as long as I'm looking at this, let me just pop in as a teacher again. There's another aspect of home use and home connection in the form of communicating with parents under the Students tab, Read Naturally Live. As a teacher, what you can do is email certificates and awards home to parents. So if you do have their email and you've entered into the student record, you'll be able to set up a little template with communication to the parent or guardian, and then select what you want to send out. So you can send out a progress letter, super reader award, or congratulations certificate. So doing that, you can always preview what you're sending, but these are just PDF files that will be sent directly via email from the system. Okay, I do also want to mention another best practice. I'm going to log out here and go back to our Read Live Help Resources page. at the beginning of a school year, if you have used the program last year, I want to just shout out about a set of practices for advancing students to the next grade, assigning new homeroom teachers, and reassigning licenses to new students. There is a page in our knowledge base that will help you with that. You can access that directly from here. So just go to the Read Live Help Resources page and click on this Read Live starting a new school year. This will take you to a recorded webinar, and there are also links here to additional information in our knowledge base and in our user guide. So again, those of you that have used the program last year and are coming back this year, especially if you're an administrator, but also if you're teachers, just click on this link, starting a new school year, to assist you with that process. Okay, another question about the iPad. How does the iPad app work? Well, the iPad app is for students only. What you're going to do is, if you already have the iPad app from a previous year, you'll want to either update it by going to the Apple iTunes Store, or delete and install new on the Apple iTunes Store the Read Naturally Live iPad app. And I have a little screenshot. The steps and the way the program works is virtually identical to the way I've demonstrated it for you here. But one thing that's different is that initial login. So you will need to have, actually this is an older screenshot of that, but you will still need to have the account ID for the iPad app, and you'll need to have the student's user ID and password. So again, I'm sorry, this is an older version of that login screen, but you still will need to have the account ID, user ID, and password. Once the student has logged in, they continue working just as they would on Chromebooks or PCs and laptops. But I do encourage everyone that has had the iPad app from the previous year to upgrade to the new version, otherwise it won't work. Okay, another question about printing. Let me go back to my application here. So teachers can print out stories. You can also print out the placement passages. To print out the placement passage, you just go back to the student's Read Naturally Live screen, click on Place, and then click on Print Placement Stories. That will bring them up as PDF files where you can print them there. To print out the actual passages, you just click on this Print Stories button under the Students tab, Read Naturally Live view, and then you select the series level and goal that you want to print. So you can print out individual stories, or you can print out all the stories from a level. Okay, I'm going to answer one more question, and then I think I'm going to wrap up because we're about 10 minutes over. So bear with me here. I'm going to bring up my slides. So a question about how old you have to be to use the program, or when can students begin using the program. So if you've placed the students and the student falls below level 1.0 in the range, so in other words, the range of 30 to 60 words correct per minute, you've placed them in a level 1.0, or you've tested them in a level 1.0 and they still are not getting to that 30 words correct per minute range, you can still have students use the program if you think it's appropriate for them, if they can recognize 50 written words and they know beginning sounds. They also should be able to manipulate, be able to use without frustration a mouse and a computer or an iPad, the iPad app. So having some dexterity with the actual technology tools, but also from our Read Naturally strategy perspective, As long as they have 50 written words and they know their beginning sounds, they can begin working, and they can begin either in a level 1.0 or they can begin in Phonics 0.8. So I'm sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions. There were quite a few of them, but I will try to get back to everyone in the future via email. And keep in mind that we're going to have another session at 3 p.m. Central today. So if you have colleagues that missed this one, feel free to have them attend the one in the afternoon. And remember that I will be sending out a link to the recording and the resources in an email tomorrow sometime in the afternoon. So thanks everyone for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Have a great year, and feel free to reach out to me at any time in the future or reach out to your solutions manager. Everyone should have one. And I'll look forward to speaking with you in the coming year and sharing more information via our newsletters, our website, and other webinars in the future. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the day. Oh, and please do fill out the poll as you leave the session today. Thanks again. Bye.